right. We have started another brand new episode of the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast. I'm going to call it BBSC because Business Blind Spots Exposed is way too long. So, BBSC, what is BBSC all about? For me personally, I came from a background of being a data guy. And as a data guy, you look at a lot of the numbers and you think you can figure out people through the numbers. Well, that's the goal. On the other side of it is sort of what I'll call the heart-centric leadership side. It's where you kind of lean into with empathy, and it's good, but gosh, it could be a little squishy sometimes. So where's the truth? Where's the truth? Right? It exists between the two.
Right.
If you don't know the story and you don't know the numbers, well, then you can't see the full picture. So you got to see both of them. Both sides of the story to be able to cobble it all together. So the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast, what we're doing here today, for anybody who's kind of joining in and listening to us, it's all about understanding the stories from the perspectives of people who've been there and done that, or have kind of seen other people go through it, because there's lots of lessons learned out there. And I personally have found that if I can learn through the lessons learned of others, gosh, that makes me stronger overnight. So today I have David Dickey on, and I just wanted to check in real quick, David, and see how you're doing. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Vinay. Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this. I do want to say to anybody who's kind of connecting in and listening in, just tell us where you're connecting from. I'd love to hear where you're from and what brought you to the podcast. It would be very interesting to hear what you think. I want to tell you about 3 events we've got coming up on the BBSC. On May 18th, I've got Israel Alvarez, who is coming through and talking about building employees that actually care through empathy. He runs a successful pest control company, and he's going to talk to us through the journey that he's taken his employees through to get to the point where they love what they do, and he loves what they do, which is a good place to be. On May 11th, I've got Shadid Alizer, and the topic of that podcast is the data behind online training. I've known Shadid from many, many lives ago, and he started telling me how much he's been spending with online trading to keep employees and the personnel in your company engaged through online training, and how to use it effectively as a tool to keep that engagement and keep the outcomes going in the right direction. So I think you'll have a really interesting time if that's something of interest for you. But today, David Dickey, I brought David on because, gosh, first of all, he has served this country in ways that others haven't with his military background in the Marine Corps. Thank you for your service, David.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So decorated Marine Corps officer, expert recruiter, Iraq combat veteran, not necessarily in any particular order there, but all different kind of capabilities that you bring to the table there. Let's see, you've been a leader of a number of companies. You've been an entrepreneur multiple times over, running small, medium, and mid-sized companies. You've lots of experience from all of our conversations in the past, running and leading technology-driven and professional services companies. I feel like there's so much to unpack just in those couple of lines there.
Yeah, it sounds pretty impressive when you say it. I should have to do an intro for me all the time.
Well, I will tell you, when you and I have talked in the past and with some of the posts, yeah. I just see there's a lot of insights that you have gained in your experience through fighting for the United States, but then also in running and serving in leadership roles. Tell me a little more about that and kind of how that's all boiled down to what you do today and putting the right butts in the right seats. I mean, it's all about the right people, right?
It is. And I think, there's a lot of stuff, I know you're a big, data-driven person, but leadership is, and when you're dealing with recruiting and hiring, it's very, very personal. And a lot of times people talk about personality, culture, and fit. But there's a lot of things, we can, that kind of brought from my military career in regards to my civilian career in leadership. And, it's hopefully have a better understanding of people, because I've literally been around the world in different capacities, and being open to understand each person is different, and they have other lots of things going on in their life. So whether they have a job, looking for a job, or desperately need to find something, understanding that person, how they qualify, if it's a right fit for them, and is the position and the company also the right fit. So it's kind of being aware of that. In the military, we were driven by data. When we were in Iraq, especially beforehand, that's all we were looking at: data, information, intelligence, to make decisions that the commander could use. Hopefully, good information to make critical decisions that lives, Marines, sailors, soldiers, airmen, everybody, their lives dependent on it. It's not that critical because lives aren't depending on it, but people's livelihoods do. So I think it's really critical to take that approach when dealing with people, because it's really important to them and the companies that I serve, to have that same empathy and to understand people on both sides. So hopefully that makes sense of kind of how I tied it in with the military and what I do now.
No, I mean, I think you and I talked once before, and I told you I've had a lot of work. I've done a lot of work, and used to be I wasn't in the military, but worked with military as a government civilian for a number of years and for a number of agencies. And the idea of all the HUMINT and SIGINT and all the kind of different intelligence streams that we just got gobs and gobs of information.
Yeah.
And sifting through all of that, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And you make really bad decisions if you don't know. If you're looking for an answer, you can probably find it, but you'll find the answer to the wrong question just as well as you'll find the right answer to the right question.
That's a great point.
So, I mean, they always say statistics lie, right? And it's very true. If you don't ask the right question in the beginning,
right,
it doesn't matter. Where I'm kind of going with that, and I always like to distill into what I call the blind spots.
Right.
The blind spot here, and I think what I heard sort of in between the lines, is that when you're talking with people, it's really more about seeking to understand what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Is that a correct assessment there?
Yeah. So, any recruiter out there, you have a list of requirements. I don't even like to call it requirements, but background in their profile or in their experience that you're looking to match with a job, the candidate to that position. But it's one of the things I ask is really find out, what are you looking for? What would get you excited about your next role, and really understanding what motivates them. Because if there's a mismatch of what motivates them and the company, it's not going to be a good fit. If they're looking for a certain amount of money, and I know for a fact that there's no way they're going to match it, it's not going to work. If they want to be hands-on, but this role is hands-off, then it's not going to work. If this person is looking for more time with family, but they have to be at the office every day and maybe weekends, it's not going to be a good fit. So once I understand what they're looking for, that's going to help me understand if they're going to be a good fit, and hopefully explain that to them, my reasonings for, explaining to them why it may not be a good fit, because that is just as important as the other side. A company that wants to hire someone with what they're looking for. But if it's not a good fit on the candidate side and what they're looking for, then, we kind of talk about other options, or, stay in touch, because I'll tell them right there, it's just not going to be the right fit for them, because I don't want to waste anyone's time. So it's really, really important to have that conversation with every candidate, every person that's applying for a job that I have a phone call or video call with. But yeah.
So I think I'm hearing something else in kind of the story that's sort of developing in my head as I'm hearing you talk further. Is, since you've traveled the world, that's probably some component of why that empathy kind of came into play, because as you're talking to people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different roles within the Marines or the other joint commands that you may or may not have worked with, right?
Yeah,
Uh, what their perspective makes all the difference in the world in terms of what they can receive as a message, right? If you're not speaking their language,
right.
someone told me the golden rule is do unto others as you want done to yourself. The platinum rule is do as they want done to them, right?
Yeah. You have to elevate that because, right, a lot of times when we say that, how you want others to, you would want others to treat you, but it's even more than that because you want to elevate that even more. But in understanding a little bit other cultures, but in my experience with recruiting, is really understanding what's driving them to look for a new position, a new career, because that will tell me a lot. It's more than just someone who's qualified that applies and their background fits. It's so much more than that because once you get through the process and potentially an offer and acceptance, if there's a mismatch in what they really, really want, it can fall apart big time around that offer phase. And I think I don't know if I did a post or I'm going to do a post. It's still kind of scary, after you get someone all the way through the process, and you're like, man, I hope they accept. And you shouldn't feel that. So if I've done my work and the company's done their work to really explain what they're looking for, and if that candidate has been truthful about what is really important to them, then it will work out. So by the time, hopefully, someone receives a great offer and to where they want to accept, it's because everything up to this point has made sense to everybody, and everybody's still excited about that person starting to include the candidate.
So I'm just kind of jotting things down as I'm hearing them,
Sure.
uh, and I think these are kind of key takeaways for people, right? So number one blind spot that I heard is seeking to understand and asking what are you looking for.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, the skills are there, but the skills are check boxes. It's deeper than that, right?
Oh yeah.
It's about what are they looking for, seeking to understand. I heard number two just now is this idea, this what is driving them to act, if and which I think leads right into this number three, which is there shouldn't be surprises if you understand what their true motivation in doing something is.
Right.
There shouldn't be a surprise that they're going to just sign on that line because you've already aligned.
Right.
There's 1,000 points of light there, right? Of alignment.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Correct. So if the benefits wasn't explained upfront, the full pay, um, who they're working for, who they're supporting for, daily routine, if that's somewhat convoluted, and then upon the offer it gets explained, and what happens sometimes there's like, oh, that's really not what I thought I was signing up for. It's very hard to come back from that because if that conversation that I had with the candidate, if I wasn't able to break down a few walls for them to feel comfortable explaining exactly what they want, that's when it potentially falls apart at the end. So it's really getting them as much as you can in a couple conversations to have a little bit of a have that trust between us to be able to share what they are looking for, and I let them know I want it to work out for them as much as I want it to work out for the company. I really do, because I don't want to have to, you know, first of all, I have two people I'm responsible for, the candidate and the client, and I really want that to mesh together. When it doesn't, in the end, it will make me look bad because it will make it look like potentially I didn't do my job, which in actuality it will probably be the case. Sometimes there's surprises where you can't predict. Just people are people,
Yeah.
but that's really it.
So something else I'm kind of getting as sort of a take home message, and I'm kind of trying to distill a lot of what you're telling me here because
Yeah.
there's some real, I think, real nuggets in here. it sounds like throughout the course of the process, when you're talking through with candidates, not only, I mean, you're kind of in the middle. You're brokering this conversation to occur, right?
Right.
You've got to bring party A and party B together. In
Right.
order for the two to come together, there's got to be some level of buy-in on both sides.
Correct.
And what I wrote down here is, do they both understand your end game? So to build that level of trust, if you go to the candidate and say, "Hey, look, I just want to get you on this thing right away, so I can start making put more bucks in my
Yeah.
pocket,"
Yeah.
then they're not as vested in it because you don't have skin in the game. But
Right.
if they see that you say, "Hey, look, I'm trying to develop a long-standing relationship with this company where they keep coming back to me again and again and
Yeah.
again," I can't screw up. So I'm being held accountable there.
Right.
So it's in my best interest to tell you everything I know to the best of my ability, right?
Exactly. And because I've been doing this for a little bit of time, because I think of that honest approach on both sides, both candidate and client. I've had candidates that I've helped just previously. They come back, they're in a position to make decisions. They've come back to me to ask me to hire for them.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with candidates over the years that didn't work out, but I placed them in other roles. So I let them know this. I'm looking to build a relationship, and if it doesn't work out in this particular situation, I want to let them know that it doesn't stop me from working with them or helping them, providing other, anything that I can do to help them in their search. Because, and I also let them know there could be other opportunities, and generally there are, that they might even be a better fit for, that we can work together again. So I let them know I'm about relationships, and that's the most important thing to me, because I know from experience, if I do everything correctly, treat people as best as I can, it will work out in the end, financially, everything else. And once they understand that, that trust begins to build. Because oftentimes some of the negative things in the recruiting field is about finding a person, placing a person, getting paid, and that cycle can be dangerous. And that's why there's some recruiters that it's more of a salesy, place people, get paid type of thing, because that's how their company's set up, or that's how they've been taught. But you can't do it that way long term, and and gain the respect of a lot of different people, I feel, anyways.
Yeah, just not sustainable. At some point in time, it catches up with you.
Yeah, I think it does, and it should, if you're not doing the right, not going about the right way.
So I actually just talked to someone a little earlier today. I left my book open here because I wanted to reference this, and it was the owner of a company. He said, retention is a big challenge for me. Trying to find and keep find employees is a challenge, right? But he said right now with some of the government stimulus,
Yeah.
he said, I'm just getting, people aren't showing up because there's so many options out there for them.
Right.
But once I get them in the door, gosh, when I am trying every which way to keep them from walking out because there are so many offers out there. And the conversation kind of walked into this idea of being able to set expectations and keep, well, I think a lot of people set expectations as soon as they walk in the door.
Right.
And that's probably the last time.
Yeah.
If they do it maybe once a year, because I think that's what some people think is. In your case, you're kind of setting the framework and sort of the level of communication of expectations pretty kind of high, right? So the person walking in the door is going to expect, hey, look, there's lots of transparency here. That's what I want.
Right.
So walking in the door, they probably have some of those expectations. So even to retain those people, probably the easiest way to do it is just kind of keep chattering with them at the same level of transparency as when they came in the door. Do you think that's a fair statement there?
That is, because you're right about retention. So if the communication about their value to the company and that position and what it means to the whole organization, if that ends after they get employed, or usually the first couple of weeks, there's some excitement being with the company, but if that ends with a company, that could be difficult to get that person excited again. And if a company's not thinking about retention right after the hire, depending on the type of position, what they get paid, they could end up jumping ship for a few dollars more an hour, or $10,000 or $20,000 more for at a more exciting company. So it is super critical within that first 30, 60, 90 days and first year plus to keep them engaged. I had a discussion with another veteran business leader, and he takes a real serious approach to leadership and buy-in. And he explains to them what it means to be in the position where they are, and how critical it is to the company that they're part of that, and what their role is. And this was a large manufacturing company. So I think once people understand that, whether they're a machine operator or a manager, that their role is super important. And if they understand that, and once they have buy-in to that, then you have them, and hopefully you'll have their loyalty. As long as you keep building that trust, and having that communication with them. So that is super super critical.
So as a company, we focus a lot on the data,
Right.
and I think the statement that we make is that all the opportunities and risks in a business is all about understanding your employees. And the number one thing that we try to help in a business with is retention first, understanding
Right.
how they're doing so that you can engage with them. And then on number two is the productivity. Number three is better decision making. But I think what I'm hearing from you here is that that journey does not begin the day they walk in the door.
Right.
That journey of expectation setting begins before they even set foot in that door. And you're kind of a steward of that expectation setting early on, right? I mean, you're brokering that conversation
Yep.
so that you can make sure that there's a match. Um, Give me a story of how that has gone right or how that's gone wrong from your perspective.
Um, I know that, yeah. So, and you're right about that. So sometimes I have to. I'm glad you reminded me, because setting that expectations is important. Because if the expectations that you set or I set are well above the bar that the company has, there could be several levels of disappointment after they start the position, and they're like, hey, Dave Dickey is, said it was all this, and it's not. So it's about being realistic about that expectation. So there's some places where a great place to work, but you do have to roll up your sleeves. So you do have to be honest about what the work actually is, but also talk to the benefits. So I placed a Marine veteran with a company. He was a manager, aerospace, doing finance, and he was with a large, very large company here in Southern California. And he had enjoyment in what he does, but he also thought there was more to it than just being a number with a large company. So, there was an opportunity with a smaller, medium-sized company in the same area here in Los Angeles. And he was really excited about being able to do some different things, grow his career, and actually see the results of his work almost immediately within the company. So I didn't stress necessarily the pay and the benefits, even though it was good and felt within what he was looking for. What he was really looking for was more ways to lead and help a company, be hands-on, and actually see that work that he does, and get that immediate feedback and reward from his efforts. And that's what he's been able to do. So shortly after he was hired, even though he's in a particular role, they have him doing something else because they saw his strengths. And yeah, he's enjoying what he does for sure. I'm trying to think of something that there's a company I don't support anymore, and we had some folks that we placed, and I really thought things were, and this was good opportunity, and then finding out later, after they left the company, these are senior people, that it just wasn't a place that was a super positive cultural fit. And I just didn't know that. I knew some of the people there and I was excited to support them. But in the end, those expectations, really dropped, and they decided that just wasn't a place that they could work there anymore. And I actually don't work with that company as a result of that. But so sometimes there's a disconnect. That's why it is important for me as an outside recruiter to understand and know the company, understand their expectations and how it translates to that role they'll step into. And then the other thing is to educate the candidate when they ask questions, to ask those direct questions of the hiring manager. What do you see this role developing into? How do you see me growing within this company? What is my role? So, because I'm not there on those one-on-one interviews with the hiring manager, but they are. So I ask them to ask those questions that they have that are really, really important to them. If it's pay, then ask. If it's about their daily routine, ask. If it's about the products and the hands-on development of products, ask. Promotion in this. I think it's important for them to ask those questions. So I really encourage them to do that, because if there's things that they are really important to them and they don't ask, then in the end, a lot of times it doesn't work out because they weren't truthful about what they're looking for. But sometimes I fell short because I was excited, but didn't really understand enough to, lay out those expectations on both sides.
So this is interesting because I will tell you, I'm probably stepping into a little bit of a pet peeve of my own here.
Go for it, man. I could list a few, I'm sure.
20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, when I was interviewing for roles and jobs earlier part of my career, clearly, I used to go in thinking that I'm just supposed to answer their questions as as the applicant. And I got to tell you, I have probably done a 180-degree shift. I've done a 180 there. Just when I go to things, I ask 10,000 questions, maybe to a fault. But by the same token, if the applicant's not asking me a lot of questions, I got to tell you, I get kind of turned off by that. Do you really care? If you're not asking me questions, I mean, I usually when I start interviews, I always start off by, so what questions do you have for me? I mean, just cold off the bat. And if I don't really have any questions. I've read the job description. I was like, all right, gosh, you're starting at a negative already with me. Do you find that makes any difference in terms of the applicant and the ability to find good applicants? Does that make any difference at all in their ability to ask questions?
Yeah, and that's why I encourage them to ask questions. And with me, but when I'm trying to kind of break down some of the walls that they may have because of some they've told or the experience, or they're not experienced talking with people and asking a lot of questions, I just, we talk through that, and I'm just like, what is it you're looking for? Ask me anything that's really, really important. And usually at the end of my conversations, I just said, if there's things that are really important that you would consider a showstopper, if there was a yes or no to the answer that you had, let me know, because that's important to me. Because a lot of times candidates aren't used to someone trying to understand what they want. That's why I always ask that. What is it that you want? I just, I said, it's a conversation we're having. Yes, yeah, it's kind of an interview. I tell them, if and when you do have an interview with a hiring manager, we'll talk again. But I'm here to help and talk through all these issues. We can talk, complain, tell me what you want, what you don't want, and then we can make sure that you're prepared if we both feel that you're a good fit in the end. But that's a great question. People should have questions, because people who don't ask questions, they have them. They're just, for whatever reason, a lot of time it's fear for one reason or the other. They don't ask. So, but so I understand that sometimes it's digging deep. And if they're really a good candidate, is just to try to develop a rapport so they open up about that. Because if it doesn't come through what they really want, then it could be a serious mismatch at the end, and you just don't want to wait to the end for an offer to be sent over, and it's just like, oh, you're like, well, why didn't you tell me that, or this and that? So, but that's super important.
Well, so I want to take a quick pause here and say, if, we've got lots of different platforms where people can be listening in.
Yep.
If anyone has questions about questions of David, I would encourage you to ask, or just kind of tell us what are your gosh, I shared one of my pet peeves: people not asking questions.
Yeah.
It's now in the public domain
Yep.
for everyone. I wonder what other people's who are listening in, what their pet peeves are. What are their best practices in trying to hire people? I'd be kind of curious what processes or thought processes go through your head. Um, but
When you talk about processes, one of the things that I've learned, if you don't do, I think we might have talked about it a little bit before, but when it comes to that offer and actual come down to the hire and start date, if you do it right, you're going to have a 90% plus, success rate. If you don't, I've seen where I've had clients say, "What is your success rate?" And theirs it was pretty 65 to 70%. So they were throwing out offers, and there were people turning them down, and they just didn't know what was happening. But it goes to that expectations. I mean, I had someone go, he's really sharp, and they actually wanted to offer him the job, but this was before COVID, shoved them in a conference room, had people come in and out. He was sitting there, and he didn't feel valued. So companies can really do a bad job when it comes to that personal touch. Now more than ever, people are, if you're a really, really sharp person, you will find something. And people also feel that they don't have to put up with, companies or organizations that they feel aren't valuing them as a potential employee. So that's super critical.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I mean, I heard some numbers there, right? 65-70% acceptance rate of your offers means you're not getting those alignments
Right.
on expectations. That it shouldn't be that low.
Right.
And I think I also heard that 90% is probably where that goal line should be set. Because if
Yes.
you're getting 90% acceptance rate, you first of all, you're pretty sure that the person's going to sign on the dotted line and say, "Yeah, I'm coming." But that means also they're probably be a lot happier walking in the door because they know they're coming there to get something they want, because ultimately that's why they're coming.
Yes.
So, uh,
Yeah.
and
I mean, it's just huge, and it shouldn't be, because you go through that process and have it not work and start over. And that is really a big pet peeve. I've learned, um, just because of that, and this is maybe good for people that are applying. I usually wait until someone starts. So sometimes there'll be a 2 3 week delay, but because people may fall out, just stuff happens. I wait to tell people that are, the other sharp candidates before, I don't, just because someone gets an offer or is being offered doesn't mean it's a done deal. Yeah. So it's, you got to hang in there.
I think it's something else I'm hearing here. I mean, so I know one thing. I told you my pet peeve is people just not asking questions. I mean, either they're not inquisitive enough and they're not really
Yeah.
interested or vested in it, or they just haven't taken any time to prep. One of the two, and
Yeah.
both of them are I don't like.
Yeah.
Spend a couple minutes if I'm going to spend some time with you.
Oh yeah. Prep time. Yeah. I've got plenty of stories for pet peeves on people not prepping.
Yeah, uh, yeah. That's probably a couple of beers right there. But I think the other thing that I've also learned is um, I'll call it the open-ended, lingering question. Right when I start out with, "So, what questions do you have for me?" I don't kind of jump directly into it. I actually just sit and wait because I'm not trying to get my agenda across and trying to sell them on the roll or anything. I just simply sit there and say, "So, what questions do you have for me?" And I would like to also see how they how they
Yeah.
respond as well, right?
Yeah.
Uh, how does that what do you think of that? How does that play into sort of the the role that you how you facilitate these
Yeah.
conversations?
When I ask them what questions they have, it depends because I do ask them several times.
Okay.
So it's it's neat to see, when they've been thinking of it and if they have a lot of questions, because a lot of times they apologize because they have questions, and I don't want them to apologize because they do, which is, and I'm like, don't apologize. This is the time to do that. But no, that's a great way to look at it. But I think in the same token that it's good for us to try to make that connection to make them feel more comfortable about asking questions.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll give some examples, like, do you have any questions about the company, your role, daily routine, the hours, and then I just make sure that I understand that. But I know I have to do. Sometimes people do need interviewers to do a little bit more to bring that out of them.
Sure.
Because I'm not not a trick question type guy. Sometimes I joke with them because I ask some of the certain questions. I'm like, I'm not trying to ask you that because of this. I'm just trying to, But the pet peeve would go if I'm asking questions, and they're like, yes, no, yes, no, and then that just gets me going. I'm like, listen, I'm talking to you to trying to get a dialogue to see if you're a good fit. I'll let them. I'm not looking for yes or no answers. Sorry, because if I don't understand how they communicate, in real sentences, it's going to be a non-starter. So,
Sure.
so there's a pet peeve that just jumped out.
So, tell me a little more in terms of you and kind of the types of companies that you help out. I mean, you and I have talked, but I'd love to hear it again. What sort of position is the company usually in when they reach out to you?
Well, for industries, aerospace, manufacturing, industrial, are big. I have some other one-offs for technology and even construction type companies, and a lot of the roles tend to be engineering because I used to run an engineering IT company. I'm just very good at that, and because I have been a business leader, I feel that, and I've got a few gray hairs and in my 50s, I can relate to the very senior business leaders, and even C-suite leaders. So I'm exceptionally good, in finding and communicating with those folks as well. So that's kind of a lot of what I do.
Tell me more about. I mean, I think as I've started to get some gray hairs myself, I started to realize that there's a couple of things that I'm a 10 at, and there's a bunch of stuff that I am probably between a 6 and, between a 4 and a 7.
Yeah.
And the less time I'm spending in that 4 to 7 zone, I definitely don't spend anything 3 or below because I suck.
Yeah.
Right. The stuff that I'm mediocre at, the less time I spend in the mediocre zone, the more my zone of genius, the better.
Yeah.
I think bringing on talent is something that a lot of people think that's just something I can do. I just need to do that. It's not really a core competency. That whole process of communicating expectations is not something that. Yeah, look, they may have started a company. I don't know, doing some sort of services for people. That's what they do well, right?
Right.
Do you find that oftentimes that people kind of give it a shot themselves and then realize something's amiss here, just not working right, and that's when they usually come to you? Talk me through that a little bit. When do people come to you, and when do they realize that they need your help?
Yeah, it does. They're like, it's more of the, the oh crap moment. We got to hire people. And we've been trying, one, they've been trying it themselves or had someone else trying to help them. And that's usually when it happens. Or, we've had a conversation before and they weren't ready and now they're ready, but it's usually when they need someone. which is fine because we have a proven process, so we know how to, whether it's start from scratch or a lot of times in certain industries, we might have candidates we recently talked to that may be in related positions, but usually I wouldn't say it's too late, but it's they realize that certain positions are super critical, and they need to hire people, because they understand that those positions that are not filled, um, it's a huge ripple effect. Whether it's a director of business development, and they got everyone else on the road 24/7, no one else sees their family when one of them is actually running the company, or they need a key logistics person because they're missing everybody. And oh, by the way, there's 5 people that drive forklifts aren't working there now. So, but usually it's when it's a critical need. Otherwise, if they could find people themselves, fill the positions, then they wouldn't need someone like me, because all I do is recruiting. I live and breathe that, and I love it. But I'm not focused on HR or onboarding or anything else that has administrative duties that would fall under the HR umbrella. I'm on recruiting, finding people, talking to people, screening people, finding that connection to be able to present someone that is highly qualified for those positions. So that's what I do. That's what I do. So a lot of companies I work with, they don't have people that fill the particular roles, as a recruiter. And those are the ones I really liked to help, because I can help with their processes. And when those people are in place, they're like, whew, they can kind of take a deep breath, because that big void was filled with a qualified person, allows them to do other things. And if it's a smaller company, focus on growing the business, because they have, a key engineer or a key salesperson there. And they're like, now I can see my family more often, and, do more of managing and growing the company. So,
Yeah. So I guess where I'm, where my head is at, or kind of where I'm thinking through this is clearly when you come to the table, there's a company that's gotten to the point where they've gone through some, uh, I'll call it do-it-yourselfer mode.
yep,
They figure, hey, we're going to go ahead and try this out. They
correct,
get to a point where they realize, look, the amount of time and effort, and sort of us taking a left turn here in terms of what our jobs, our responsibilities are,
right,
the juice is not worth the squeeze.
yep,
Let's bring in an expert to do it.
yep,
Um, Cost seems like it's always something that comes
sure,
to when I hear about recruiters. Cost always comes to mind. But then I've also heard, look, if you want to spend a lot of money, hire an amateur to do a professional's job.
yep,
And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing here is, look, you can go spend all the time you want trying to figure out how to do it, but look, this is what I do. I'm so much more efficient at it than you'll probably ever be.
yeah.
Is that kind of the way they should think about it?
I don't like to say that, because they're doing that, but yeah, it's tens of thousands of dollars of lost revenue when a position isn't filled, especially if it's someone that has to do with contributing to the bottom line numbers
Yeah.
of that company. Um, because I end up spending, or a company will, to recruit is a lot. But if they work with me, we do all the advertisement. We know what to do. We know how to write a job description. We make it attractive, really, to be, to advertise that position, because that's what we do. And we have processes and, platforms in place to receive those resumes and rack and stack them, if you will. That, most companies, when they put out a job ad, they may get inundated with a bunch of resumes, and it takes a long time for them to go through there. But the way we've built our systems, it makes it a little bit easier for us to go and identify people, and screen and get them prepped. It's yeah, it's safe, because the time we spend, because that's what we do every day, and the time that we put in finding qualified candidates, I can't imagine them doing anything else but recruiting. And oftentimes it's very labor intensive from start to finish. Make sure you have the right job communicated, advertised, reaching out, reviewing. It takes a lot, and that could be just for one position. So if they have to fill 5 engineering positions that are all different, that is more than a full-time job. So the money they'll save by working with someone that does it day in day out is huge, and the money they'll save by getting that position filled quickly so they can move on, be more productive. Yeah, it's huge, and for people in aerospace, it could be, especially if they're supporting the government. You know this. If you don't have a butt in a seat, you can't bill. Those are billable hours that you're not getting paid for because you don't have a person. And that could be, tens of thousands, or if it's multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue that you're not getting because you don't have a qualified person filling a seat. I mean, it's actually pretty simple when you look at it, but when they
Yeah.
look at paying me or doing something else, that's when they may hesitate.
I love working with my hands. I love I have an old BMW that I take to the racetrack, and I love fixing it.
Yeah,
But after having kids and starting a company and my wife running a company, gosh, time has become a little more of at a little more of a premium.
yeah,
I was just talking to the guy at the shop that who works on. He also races cars too, so we always have a good conversation. And he had his car up on the jack, and here he's able to just reach up and start changing some of the bushings and the bolts, suspension components. I was like, man, I can't
yeah,
wait to do that. And he's like, Vinay, you got to stop try to be a mechanic. You're not a mechanic,
yeah, yeah,
right? And he said, look, if you have one of these at home, it'll. I mean, and the point being here is just that for me to get the car up so I can start changing out some of the suspension components of the car. Forget the tools. Forget just carving
yeah,
out 4 hours of time to do all that stuff.
yeah.
It's just the process of pulling everything out. Oh, I got to get out from underneath and pull this off. You're already doing it, so you're just going to be so much more efficient at it.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
and if you're just looking at the cost of bringing the expertise in the door, I think what I'm hearing is that's just too short sighted a view, because I mean, especially if it's like a director of business development. I mean, if it takes them 6 months to get to a point where they're producing, do
yeah.
you want to be 6 months? Right?
No, it's huge, and you're right. Everything's set up, and we advertise and do everything. There's a huge cost on our end to start advertise to get someone that they don't have to, that the company doesn't have to do, or an organization doesn't have to do. And they don't have to worry about posting on multiple boards. They don't have to worry about the phone calls. Once they receive a candidate, they decide, do we do a phone screen initially? Do we get it over to the hiring manager, have a conversation? Hey, this person looks great. We'll bring them in for an in-person. But besides that, all that other front end stuff to get it to the hiring manager is done. It's
Yeah.
all done. We'll work with them, get them set up, reference check, help them with the onboarding, make sure they're ready to go where they're supposed to be at the right time. We will work as closely with anyone as much as they want. If they want to take it, from the time they get the candidate, they want to, I don't recommend they take complete control because of the relationship we developed, because I feel if I lose complete control, you don't want to. I just don't feel it's a good idea to sever all ties with someone I've developed a relationship. I want to do that together with the client to make sure once they're placed, and along the way, there's nothing that's misinterpreted. So that's part of it. But yeah, we have everything in place. It's almost a plug and play, but it's nothing, systems wise. They don't have to set up anything. It just really streamlines things for them, and there's actual cost savings in the process that they don't realize, in addition to the cost of not having that position open. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I got a chance to explain that, and I don't get a chance to do that all the time. So thanks.
So, just doing a time check here. We're probably about 10 minutes out from the hour, and I wanted to kind of a couple other things that were on the mind that I wanted to bring up, and that is I think look, there's a bunch of yahoos out in any industry.
Yep.
Part of for me, I'm very much a hey, look, if I have gut, I'm a trust but verify kind of person, right?
Yep.
I trust first, but I kind of ask some questions to make sure. Look, you and
Yep.
I have talked a couple times. I think we get along famously. I trust you already. There's that level,
Yeah.
but not everybody in recruiting does it the way you do, right? I don't know that I necessarily trust them.
Yeah.
How would you give me three things that you would say someone should ask to kind of get a better sense of how that they've got somebody who's going to help them with recruiting the way they need. What would someone need to ask you to really truly understand David Dickey?
Oh, I want them to ask about my process,
Okay.
because what differentiates, yeah, the Patriot recruiting method, because and I did something on this a year ago, just on choosing a recruiting agency. Ask about the recruiters or recruiting company's process, because if all they're going to do is shove a bunch of resumes at you, then you're not getting more value than what you get on your own. In fact, one of my new clients says, "Hey, Dave, you're not going to send me 45 resumes, are you?" And I laughed and I'm like, did someone, a recruiting agency, actually do that? They just attach a bunch of resumes they had in the queue and send them over. I mean, that's ridiculous. A vice president that doesn't have time to go through 30 resumes. That's, I mean, ridiculous. So
What
I would
and
ask, yeah,
what do they look for in that process? Kind of say, hey, this one is a good process versus a bad process. What do you do in your process that kind of make adds the value?
sure. The big thing is the planning, having an understanding of what that job description is, and on both sides. So what's critical to them? Because they can say, oh, yeah, and I try to avoid that, although I probably still have it on my job. This is a requirement. You know, the company you could do. When I ask the hiring manager, can you do without a person who has that? Oh yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to ask them for that. But what about this? Do they need a bachelor's in mechanical engineering? Oh yeah, that's a must. Do they need to have SolidWorks? Yes. Do they need to know CAD or something? No, no. Okay. So once you understand that, then you can put together that job description. And then next is how we advertise and send it out to multiple job boards. And then it's taking the time to do the research, to find candidates, and then doing the recruit and screening. Um, and then it's about getting someone ready to, because we nominate only about the top three to be considered. And we have a completed format that equals, we have a grid system. So this is what they're looking for, the company, and this is their qualifications. And this is some things that are important, and we have questions that they answer. So they have a whole package that's submitted to the company along with their resume to be considered. And then work with them in the process of interviewing. And I tell them I'll work very closely with that. And even up to the point where they're thinking about an offer, I make sure all those things are confirmed. Pay, benefits, everybody understands everything. I just had a young man, engineer, get an offer and accepted. And I made sure that it was what he was looking for. We made sure he took a look at the whole benefits package before he accepted. Um, yeah, and it worked out well. So it has to fit everything. So it starts with the planning right up until the time that someone starts the first day, and everything in between, and work together with them. But if a recruiter can't explain that process that makes sense, then what are they doing?
Yeah. What are you paying for?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what are you paying for? You're not paying for someone to send you a whole bunch of resumes and have them go through it. I'm not going to do that. So I say it's a top three. You're going to get three qualified candidates. I'm going to get to them in this time frame, depending on when they're looking for. I confirm that time frame within a couple of weeks. Is that good for you? And then yeah, that's kind of the big thing, is understanding the process.
So I,
Um,
as you said that, what I'm imagining is sort of the mechanic that I go to and take my car and say, hey, I need to change some of these suspension components. Like and they say, "Hey, why don't you come back into the garage and help me get the lift up?" I was like, "Wait, what am I paying you for?" Right?
Exactly.
I mean, so if they're not taking me from the beginning, so and this is probably where people have gotten burned in the past, is that they hire somebody, they pay them a finder's fee to bring that person in the door, but then they send them 45 resumes. Well, what have you really added as value to the process, because
Yeah.
you haven't done anything. So
No, you don't. So you have to let them know that value added is there, and if it's not there, then you'll understand. So if they're looking more of just getting a bunch of resumes, then they just get a subscription to somewhere and put it out there and see what happens. Um, that's perfectly fine if that's what they want to do, because sometimes it's not a match. Because I know there's a ton of effort on my side and expense, and it may not be worth it for me either. But if we don't have that common ground, that they understand that there's a huge benefit, then maybe it's not the right fit for both of us.
So I want to kind of review back through a couple of things that I heard as blind spots here. Um, Number one, I heard is when you're talking to candidates, it's about seeking to understand and letting them give you a real answer in terms of what they're looking for.
Yep.
Because if you can't find that match, and I think um, that's easier said than done. Is I think is the understatement there, right?
Yep.
Number two is what is driving them to act. If you don't understand what's driving them to act, you won't get the results out of them. Especially in this case, getting them to sign. You should be looking for 90% of
Yep.
them to be signing and saying, "Yeah, I'm coming on board." It should this, which leads to this number three, which is there should not be surprises. I mean, if you're telling them what they should be expecting, and they're telling you what they want and what you're expecting, both sides are truly bilaterally communicating there. Surprises should go away. I mean, everyone kind of understands what's happening. And the last one I wrote down here is this: understanding the end game. If everybody understands either side's, or in this case, all three parties' motivations, well, then look, the transparency is going to come along with it, and the trust level is going to come with it, and that's when you get to that 90%.
Yeah, no, it's huge. And the other thing, if for some reason, like the communication with the client or the company, if that's lacking, then in the end, it's not going to work out too. Because if there's something missing that I'm communicating, and in the end, it comes down to when the candidate's going to get an offer, um, there was information that was just not knowingly shared. A lot of times not on purpose. A lot of times that additional information would have helped, um, for the candidate to make a decision, or maybe something about the candidate that came about. So some, on a reference check or something, it was one of those last minute showstoppers that wasn't discovered during this whole process. That's so there's some blind spots and to be aware of it, but it's open communication, transparency is huge, and there's no reason why everyone shouldn't be transparent about this whole process. It's going to save time. It's going to increase retention, and it's also going to strengthen reputation of the company. And hopefully, if you're a good recruiter, then there'll be less people that think badly about recruiters, right?
Well, it's funny how those sort of things, I feel like, pervade most all human relationships, right?
Yeah.
Just being frank and honest. I mean, I know sometimes it's hard or it feels a little more difficult to be completely honest. But gosh,
Yeah.
it's a long way when you just kind of tell them the way it is.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
Nothing bad,
Yeah.
right?
Well, David, I appreciate you sharing. I think there's a couple of good nuggets I got out of here myself in terms of these blind spots that I'd love to share with people, and hope everyone who has listened in or may listen in the future to the podcast or on the YouTube channel get something out of this. And you can always reach out to David. We'll put his contact information into all the posts. So
Thanks, Vinay. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our time today. So thanks for the opportunity.
yeah, thank you. As always, I get something out of our conversations.
Awesome. All right.